more doctors smoke Camel, right? So, you know, the tobacco industry now wins many awards, many CSR awards. They do great stakeholder engagement. But actually, it's peripheral. They haven't changed their core business, which is harmful. No other industry kills more people other than the military than tobacco. And so, not just to pick on this industry, but all of our major industries are not using CSR to change their business model. They're just fitting it in a public relations department, an HR department. It tends to be quite small. It's peripheral in another way as well. It hardly ever gets below the big branded companies, right? It's always the usual suspects. If you're lucky, the top 100 companies in an economy. So what about those tens, thousands, millions of small and medium-sized enterprises that collectively have much bigger impact? They're not doing CSR, and so the overall impact is negative. The third and final curse, if you like, is uneconomic CSR. Now, we had a whole CEO workshop on the business case, and we do like to tell ourselves that there's a business case. But as some of the presentations pointed out, it's actually not that clear. In specific instances, yes, you can find a business case. Eco-efficiency, reduce your energy, reduce your waste. Of course, you will save costs. But the fact of the matter is the market consistently rewards irresponsible behavior. This example here is the Vice Fund. It's a fund in the United States that only invests in the so-called sin industries, so tobacco, alcohol, gambling, and military. And the blue line is how well they're doing in the market. They're completely outperforming the market. The black line is the market. The orange line is a socially responsible investment fund. We don't even have to go to that sort of extreme to make the point. We know we have to pay more for organic products. We have to pay more for fair trade products. We have to pay more for renewable energy. Why? Because the market incentives are wrong. They do not consistently reward responsible behavior. And so as a result of this, in 2009 in London, I held a funeral for CSR. So this is me, and you can just about make out there's a coffin there. So we buried CSR, and I gave a speech, a eulogy, saying how much, what a wonderful contribution the old CSR, which I called CSR 1.0, had made. But actually it was time for that version of CSR to die, because otherwise what we'll see over the next 20 years is more CSR and the problems getting worse. So what I started thinking is the kind of change we need is similar to the change we've seen with the web, right? Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. And there are lots of similarities. So we look at Web 1.0, of course it hadn't gone to scale. 46 million users in 1996, and mainly one-way traffic, right? It was about putting content online, telling the world how wonderful your company is, basically a space for advertising. And that's not too different to what companies are still doing today. Putting out information into the world saying, look, you know, read our CSR report, we are responsible, we are sustainable, and not going to scale. You know, these are a handful of companies. Even the biggest standard we've got, the Global Compact, 8,000 companies, compared to tens of millions of companies around the world. So we need to get beyond this sort of very shallow version. At its extreme is this idea expressed in this book, Philanthrocapitalism, which I think is a disaster of an idea. You probably can't read the subtitle, but it says, How the Rich Can Save the World. Yeah, so I blogged very critically against this concept in this book, and so the authors of the book blogged back very critical of my work. But I haven't changed my mind. So what we need is a kind of a change like we've seen with Web 2.0. So Web 2.0, what's different? Well, it's gone to scale. So 1 billion users by 2006. Most importantly, it's two-way traffic. Yeah, it's user-generated content. It's collective intelligence. It's the Wikipedias and the blogs and the tweets, right? It's a completely different way of operating, even though the technology is more or less the same. And in the same way, we need the kind of leap in CSR. And I put up Ray Anderson's book here because I think, as founder of Interface, he was one of the first in 1994 to really grasp this idea that business and industry as we currently operate is broken. It does not solve the problems of the world. It's part of the crisis, not part of the solution. And so the age of responsibility that I believe we need to get to is about transformative CSR, or in the book here I call it systemic. It's about how do you change the system and the incentives, because quite frankly I'm not sure we can expect companies to go much further than strategic CSR unless the rules of the game change. And we know that strategic CSR just isn't going to do it. How are we going to get to the second industrial revolution, which by the way we will have to get to? You don't get 80 to 90% reduction in carbon emissions by 2050 without completely redesigning the global economy. So how do you get to that without a transformation? I use the example of Patagonia, another company, US apparel manufacturer, that really gets this message, that is all about completely redesigning the business. So there are 5 principles we can use that we should be judging companies everywhere, including in Nigeria, on whether they're making this leap. The first is creativity. So here on the left we've got Apple's iPhone. Now, it would be hard to argue that Apple isn't a creative company, one of the most innovative companies in the world. But are they using that creativity to solve the problems of the world? I'm not sure that they are. By contrast, something you're very familiar with, I'm sure, Vodafone's M-Pesa, right? An innovation that allowed initially the population of Kenya to start transferring money by text. Why? Because 80% of the population didn't have access to business services. And as a result, they innovated, they brought this in. Not only did it empower the population, it allowed remittances to be transferred from overseas, from the UK. And as you know, the other way is by using Western Union, where they take a big cut. And also it cut out corruption, because it's all done electronically. So an innovation that tackles a social problem. The second principle is scalability. Now on the left here we have the Ethical Trading Initiative. Wonderful initiative. It's about paying fair wages to farmers in the third world, producers. And it's something that of course we should support. The problem is it's never gone to scale. In virtually any market that you look at, you're lucky if you get 10% of the market that are what we might call ethical consumers. And I'll tell you a little story quickly. They did an experiment in Australia where they asked customers if they wanted fair trade coffee. Okay, now Australia is pretty sophisticated, first world country, and they didn't even have to pay more for the fair trade coffee. 1% of the population bought the fair trade coffee. Then they changed the experiment. They said, would you like fair trade coffee? They prompted them. They actually asked them, would you like fair trade coffee? And it went up to 30%. Then they changed the experiment again and they said, would you like fair trade coffee? And they asked them when somebody was standing next to them. And it went up to 60%. So this is about psychology. When they questioned the people afterwards, they said, yeah, of course we support fair trade. We believe in it. It's in our values. But it didn't affect the consumer behavior. So I'm not very positive that that kind of consumer-led behavior is really going to get us where we need to go. By contrast, you look at Walmart. What happened? 2006, Hurricane Katrina hits the coast of America. And the employees of Walmart suddenly open the stores to whoever needs goods. Take whatever you need for free. We're in a crisis. And Lee Scott, the CEO at that time, could have fired those employees. But instead he thought, how can we be this company that we were during Hurricane Katrina every single day? How can we bring out the best and really make a positive contribution? And so he began to transform Walmart. And they began with their sustainability index and so on. One of the things they did is what we call choice editing. They said no longer will you be able to buy any cotton products, in other words, anything, any apparel, unless it's organic. Not only that, but all fish products will be marine